Everything in Germany is well regulated. Of course, also the work life. If you work in Germany, or you're gonna work in Germany, or if you want to become an employer in Germany, I want to show you some of the most important labor laws. Most of these laws also exist in one way or the other in the rest of the EU, but we just look upon Germany. We start again in history. In medieval times, soldiers and mercenaries negotiated over Schadlosbriefe, harmless letters, that would cover costs for lost or damaged equipment or sometimes also serious injuries. Since 1260 we know about miners' guilds, so-called Knappschaften. These guilds cared for injured and ill miners and their surviving dependents. The first hospital by a miners' guild is dated 1290 at the St. Johannes Church in Bergdorf near Goslar. Also other guilds and crafts in many towns cared for their members. Next to those guilds of craft, where the master craftsmen were members, the journeymen consolidated in Gesellschaften or Gesellenbruderschaften, journeymen confraternities. With the industrialization in the 18th century, more simple workers were needed, left the villages and acres, sometimes forced, as for example the weavers, lost their additional income as more and more mechanical weaving looms were built. At that point the situation for the employees became worse because of a lack of regulations. While in medieval times the sovereigns usually cared for their people as they needed the workforce, the few industrialists often didn't care as enough other workers were available. Society changed from the estates for the realm, the Ständegesellschaft, to social classes, while the workers were still at the lowest level. Next to this, associations like trade unions or journeyman confraternities were often forbidden. While fighting for their rights and participation started in England in the beginning 19th century, and in France the people fought for a certain freedom of association, this all led to the revolutions in 1848. In 1833 England and later in 1839 Prussia declared child labor as illegal. The Prussian regulative defined teenager under 16 that couldn't prove 3 years of school and could not read and write properly were not allowed to work in a factory, except a school was attached to the factory. If they could prove, they were not allowed to work more than 10 hours a day. Also teenagers below 16 were not allowed to work at night hours between 9 in the evening and 5 in the morning, or on Sundays or bank holidays. The work for kids under 9 was totally forbidden in factories and mines. In the Gewerbeordnung, the trade law of North German Confederation, the freedom of association again was declared. In Germany, the first parties for workers were founded in 1863. Through different fusions, they formed the SPD, the Social Democrat Party, in 1890. In 1883, the first statutory insurance, the health insurance, was invented. Otto von Bismarck said, "My thought was to win over the working classes, or should I say bribe them into seeing the state as a socialist institution that exists for their sake and wants to see to their welfare." Later, more and more social insurances were invented. While most insurances are paid half and half by the employee and the employer, the accident insurance is fully paid by the employer as he has to care for the security in his premises. As construction workers had general problems, as it was usual that they were laid off in the winter when the construction was not possible because of cold weather, they couldn't gain leave entitlement. Therefore, special funds were made to support them. A similar fund was made for artists in 1983. The latest insurance was made for nurse care, to encumbrance the health insurance from that burden as people become older. Usually, every employee and his family is insured. If the employee earns more than 520 euro per month, the employee has to pay into the insurances. If the employee earns more than about 66,000 euro per year, the employee could choose to be insured in a private health insurance than a statutory health insurance. I will do further videos on the different insurances. In 1926, a new labor jurisdiction was created. In medieval times, there were a kind of arbitral tribunals at the guilds and crafts. During the Third Reich, all unions and parties were banned, but the work contract law and the employment protection was extended. After 1945, the trade unions were allowed again and works council were allowed in the companies. In 1952, the Betriebsverfassungsgesetz, the Works Council Constitution Act, was published. The first president of the Federal Labor Court from 1954 till 1963, who was also a judge in the Third Reich, formed the labor law in a way pro-employer and a common relationship, so political strikes were illegal as well as whistleblowing. Even when the EU requested the member states to have a law to protect whistleblowers, Germany was not able to meet the deadline in December 2021. On 12th of May this year, the new law passed the Bundesrat and will enter into force from July this year for companies with more than 250 employees and from January 2024 for companies with more than 50 employees. A link is in the description. In 1976, the Co-Determination Act was published that defines the admission of employee representatives in a board of directors of a public limited company. Okay, let's take a deep breath. If you want to have a look at all law that affects the work, there are more than 30 German laws. We will have a look at the most important ones. A contract between employer and employee could be made by handshake, but is usually made in writing. If the contract is limited in time, the limitation or the reason for the limitation, like as long as the other employee is in parental leave, has to be entered in the contract. A limited contract can last only up to 2 years. After that, there has to be an unlimited contract except the reason lasts longer. Limited contracts always have to be in writing. A notice for dismissal has to be made always in writing and has to have a reason, if it is not done in a probation period. Depending on the length of employment, the period of notice grows from 1 to 7 months. A link is in the description. In the Arbeitszeitgesetz, Work Time Act, it is defined how long you are allowed to work. Work time is from Monday to Saturday, while in Germany we usually have a 5-day week. Sundays, as well as bank holidays, are free in general except for certain businesses like petrol station, railways, hotels, restaurants or healthcare. If a normal factory or shop wants to open on a Sunday or bank holiday, there has to be an official permission. Usually the work time is up to 8 hours a day. Working more than 10 hours a day is prohibited in general. The time between 8 hours and 10 hours is overtime and this has to be rewarded. Any clause in a contract like all overtime is included in the salary, mit dem Gehalt sind alle Überstunden abgegolten, is invalid if you do not earn at least more than about 80,000 euro a year. An adult has to make at least a break of 30 minutes after 6 hours of work, and if he works more than 9 hours there has to be another break of at least 15 minutes. An underage worker has to have a break of 30 minutes after 4.5 hours and another 30 minutes if the work is more than 6 hours. An underage employee is not allowed to work more than 8 hours a day. They only have a 5 days week and are not allowed to work during night times. Between 2 work days, you have to rest for at least 11 hours. So between the end of the work on one day and the start of the work on the next day, there have to be 11 free hours. If you drive a car or truck as part of your work, this time is work time. If you drive from work home, this is not your work time. Every employee has a legal entitlement of at least 4 weeks of paid vacation a year. If you have a 6 days week, these are at least 24 days or 20 days for a 5 days week. Even if you work at a private household and cook or clean only 2 times a week, you get at least 8 days of paid vacation. Very often German companies offer up to 30 days of paid vacation. Underage employees have a slightly higher legal entitlement up to 30 days. The vacation days have to be taken in a year, and the employees has to be granted at least 2 weeks in a row. On bank holidays, Germans do usually not work, as they do not on Sundays. There are about 10 to 14 bank holidays depending on the federal state and the area in the state. If a bank holiday covers a usual work day, you still get paid for this as you would have worked on that day. Bank holidays are not shifted, so if a bank holiday is on the weekend, what was always free, you do not get an extra pay or an extra free day for this bank holiday. Minimum payment is actually 12 euro per hour, so a full-time worker at minimum wage earns a bit more than 2,000 euro per month or about 24,500 euro per year. Minimum wage is not valid for apprentice in the apprenticeship. A link to the minimum wage in English is in the description. The income taxes are deducted through the payroll and directly transferred to the tax office. Also, the other fees for insurances are calculated in payroll and transferred directly, except if you have a private health insurance. If you think about running a business, get a well-trained payroll clerk or ask a tax advisor, as the payroll in Germany is one of the most complex payrolls in the world. If the employer calculates the wrong tax or fees and sends too few to the tax office or insurance institution, the employer is responsible for this. Even garnishment were calculated through payroll. If you become ill, you have to inform the employer directly. After a maximum of 3 days of illness, the employer has to get an attestation. The attestation are sent automatically via DÜV to the employer by the doctor for statutory health insured persons. You still get paid your salary as if you would have worked the time until you are back again or for 42 days. The employer will get back a part or all of that money from the health insurance. After that time, if you are still ill, you get the sickness allowance, the Krankengeld, from the statutory health insurance. A private health insurance does only pay this if this is insured separately. If your kid becomes ill and you have to care for it, depending on the wage agreement, you have 10 or more days of paid leave to care for your sick child a year. If the kid is still ill, you get unpaid leave. Employers in Germany know that parents have to care for their kids. Very often they make special plans for part-time employees if they have to bring kids to kindergarten or schools. If a female employee becomes pregnant, she has to inform the employer immediately. If everything is fine during the pregnancy, she will go into paid maternity leave 6 weeks before the planned birth date and 8 weeks after the given birth. During pregnancy, the women are not allowed to work in dangerous places through radiation, chemicals, or weight. They are also not allowed to work at night times. Many companies have special departments for pregnant women. If the employer cannot offer you a secure work or there are other problems during the pregnancy, you will be sent into maternity leave. Payments are usually made through a bank transfer onto your account. Monthly salaries are often paid at the end of the month and have to be paid until the first of the following month. Hourly wages are often paid at the beginning of the next month, while these payments have to be done until the 15th of the following month. So payment in Germany is usually on a monthly basis. If you have a problem with your employer, check if there's a Betriebsrat or Personalrat in your company. Otherwise, the trade unions will also help. You can also contact the Agentur für Arbeit, the employment office, or you have to ask a lawyer. There are also sometimes news groups and forums where certain topics are discussed. Thank you for watching. If you have further questions, write them down in the comments. If you like it, give a thumbs up, and if you like more content, subscribe. See you next time.